Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Return to Base podcast. Today, we have an excellent guest, Alex Brammer. He's a former Army Ranger and is currently the Vice President of Business Development at Luxor Mining. No, that's not gold. It's not diamonds or silver or even lithium. It's actually Bitcoin, which is a very interesting subject in and of itself. Alex was able to discover an aptitude and passion for Bitcoin as he was in the Army and towards the end of his career, and was able to parlay that into a skill bridge and then ultimately a full-time job offer. So it's going to be a really great discussion about his career in the military, what led him to get medically retired, actually, how he discovered Bitcoin and was able to create a career out of that. So thanks for joining us. Let's do this.
Bravo Zulu, this is Victor Lima. We are RTB. This is Return to Base, a VeteranLife podcast.
Hey, everybody. I'm here with Alex Brammer, former Army Ranger and currently the Vice President of a crypto mining firm, Vice President of Business Development at crypto mining firm Luxor Mining. Did I get all that right, Alex?
Yep.
Cool. So United States Army Ranger, the illustrious. So not just a guy who wears the tab and been to school, but somebody who was in regiment, right?
Yeah, that's right. Tambouret and all.
Tambouret. Were you there when they had the Black Berets?
No, I came in. I think that transition happened in 01. I came in 05.
Okay, cool. You know, I think the tan beret looked better anyways.
I agree. Yeah, especially with the desert boots. It's got a nice match to it.
Yeah. One interesting thing about the tan beret, I had never been to Ranger School, never been in regiment, but the one of my guys, a couple of my guys I sent down to Ranger School when I was a team sergeant. And I went down there for the graduation. I swear to God, the first person I saw with the tan beret was a pregnant lady. And I was like, oh, I did not realize that everybody wore the tan beret.
What? That's, what year was that? That had to have been recently.
No, yeah, it was like, I don't know, 2015 or something like that. And it was just a surprise. I just thought, for that they would wear the Marine beret like the support folks at
support guys at group.
Yeah, but I was like, oh, okay. So anyhow, so how long did you spend in the Army?
Just retired, medically retired after 12 years. Did about 4 in regiment. Then I spent an inordinate amount of time in school. I ended up going from regiment, going to West Point and commissioning. Then did a couple years of grad school on the backside of that, and then came back to be an infantry officer. Did time at 82nd, and then so that was the 82nd was for OIR, the ISIS fight, and then came up here to JBLM to be a striker company commander right before retirement.
Right on. So what do you consider your glory days, man? Do you miss those days as like a young soldier in regiment?
Oh yeah. The glory days are for sure like being a fire team leader in regiment. That doesn't like being a fire team leader in regiment during the surge in Iraq. The first surge in Iraq was about as good as it gets in terms of time on target and just the mission set. That was a lot of fun.
So what crazy good business development / sales guy convinced you, hey, you know what would be great? You seem like you're a good leader and you're kind of smart. You should be an officer, man. It's going to be awesome. Who told you that?
Dude, it was a bunch of O's in Ranger School that like planted the seed.
Oh my God.
And it was like their little campaign throughout all 3 phases to try and get me to go. And I kind of resisted it, did a couple more deployments. And then actually my commander, I was the weapons squad leader in mobility, basically mobility and CO on the 3rd trip. Oh, do I got to go closer? Okay.
Yeah, just a little bit closer.
Yeah. And got back. So I got pretty close with he was a task force commander in, to crit in 08. Got pretty close with him. He was a West Point guy. And we just talked about it afterwards. And turned out to be a pretty good opportunity. It was mostly about kind of GT score, SAT, stuff like that. He's like, hey, if you want to give this a shot, because I dropped out of high school when I was 14, so I didn't have a lot of college. There were not a lot of college prospects. But then the military and then West Point obviously prioritizes getting prior service folks coming in. The more interesting your background is, the more lenient they are on the other stuff. And so they kind of looked at my high school transcripts and they compared those to kind of deployment records. And they're like, okay, we can give this a shot. And it ended up working out. But the crossover to the dark side definitely derailed a lot of other best laid plans that I had hatched when I was like 20, 21 years old. But
NFA, man, no fun allowed.
Dude, the amount of paperwork, man, I'm telling you, everyone's like, oh yeah, being an officer, it's all paperwork. And like through PL time, that really wasn't true.
Right.
But then you get up and you go up to brigade staff and you go into command and your life is just, consumed with all the things that I used to make fun of officers for. So it was an interesting turn of the tables.
Yeah. There's a couple things I want to unpack there. Number one is, I imagine there's probably a couple people, maybe some buddies who you told about when you were in regiment, and you're probably like, man, these guys want me to go to West Point. And I can imagine one of them like walking up to the PL going, hey, sir, I want to go to West Point. And they're like, shut up, dummy. Get back in line, dude. Did you see any of that? Come on.
It's honestly like there was very few. I mean, you know how it is. I'm sure it was the same in the teams. Like most of the guys there, like we all loved what we did, especially in those years. Like those years were when budgets were super fat and the op tempo was super high, and everyone was on kind of the 7 and 3 month rotations. And it was just a lot of fun. So I didn't see much of that when I was there. I know that it's increasingly, as the stuff wound down in Iraq and Afghanistan and the broader Middle East, and the deployment schedule started to slow down, and kind of authorities and permissions started to get ratcheted up to where it wasn't as much fun on target. I saw a little bit more of that, but I don't think typically like the guys that self opt in to going to West Point are probably they're naturally, they have the academic background and whatnot, and they know it. And I think a lot of those guys that are the kind of the classic, like fire breathing team leaders don't really give a shit about West Point. So I don't think I saw too much knocking on the PLs or the XO's doors trying to figure out how to go to West Point.
Yeah. By the way, do you get any shit from like the Rangers of the 90s or whatever? Because I mean, you never even had to have like a good haircut, right?
Oh, dude, I had hair just about this long when I was there. And
for the listeners, his hair's long enough. It's like 6 inches long. He's got a beard. But back in the day, they had the white walls, man, and like the Ranger high and tight.
Yeah, that like mentality for some of the older guys, right when I first came in, there was still a little bit of that. And I think too, one thing I would say, having been around quite a few different units, SOF and conventional, like there is undoubtedly there's just a level of discipline in the Ranger Regiment that is kind of unmatched anywhere else that I've been. And that has kind of persisted. Uniform standards have changed and stuff has gone, like Ranger Regiment has kind of like gone towards the JSOC route, and they, everything that Big Daddy CAG does, they try and, that's going to trickle down in, longer hair, different kind of kit, different weapon systems and whatnot. But at the end of the day, like, I think the strength of regiment is the discipline of the, of the formation and the individuals inside of it. And I think that was the thing that stuck out to me most, long hair or not. That was,
Yeah. And I'll tell you, so I came in the Army in 1998, and there still was that mentality of the people who I've known who were a regiment. But I never forget going to Airborne School in like 2002 or something. And some of those guys tell me some of the stuff that goes on in the barracks and stuff. I was like, what? It was a wild time back in the day on Fort Benning. It sounds like
that. I'll never forget showing up to regiment. So you graduate RIP and you get your tambouret, and like the narrative throughout RIP back then anyway, I don't think it's changed, is like, hey, your hardest day in RIP is easier than your easiest day, when you get to battalion. And that's kind of like, I think that's a pretty effective scare tactic, but it was like, I got to reception battalion here as a PV2 here at Fort Lewis. And, like as the days drew nearer to when I knew that that the folks from 275 were going to come and grab us up and bring us to the compound on the bus, like there was a significant sense of dread that was growing by the day. And it was 100% founded. Like it was the first, like, I would say the first 2 weeks were just hell. Like it's just, and this was back when like there was, hazing was not only allowed, but it was like, it was incentivized and accepted. And the first 2 weeks were pretty fucking crazy. The other thing that was sorry if I can't swear on this thing. I'm assuming giving the target audience, I can say whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah. We'll put a content warning. We'll be like, hey man, two dudes cussing like Rangers.
It was that was an interesting. And then a week after I got there is when Sergeant Bram and Sergeant Barraza were killed. And so the whole, you know how it is, like everything goes on lockdown. They go on notification alert process. This was like, I showed up right at the rear, at the end of rear D. And back then all the barracks had bars in them. So like every company barracks had a company bar. It was fully stocked. And that was like 3 days of like, wild grieving and, aggressive consumption of mass quantities of alcohol. And like, we're all sitting there as new privates with all these dudes that have deployed over and over with these guys. And they're like in significant pain. Yeah. Just sitting there being like, holy fuck. And like all the things that, there wasn't any weird shit going on. It was all kind of like just indoctrination, I guess, continuing indoctrination, but it was definitely an eye-opening thing to show up to.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. That's coming in on the backside of a deployment. It's kind of like the Band of Brothers, right? When they're back in England and the replacements are there and they're just like, what do you have that on for? Yeah. So you're first one who has been on this podcast who actually went through RIP. So I like to hear stuff about training because it's the worst times and it's the best of times. Yeah. I always say this, and for those people who listen regularly, you've heard me say that in training, you just know it sucks and you're reminded that it sucks. But now that you're retired, you look back and you're like, man, that did suck, but you don't remember any of the good stuff. So tell me a little bit about like what happens day one of RIP. You're fresh out of basic and airborne school, right? And then some bus comes and it's full of mean ass dudes who take you somewhere and just abuse you for like.
I thought you said you hadn't been to RIP.
No, I haven't. I just heard so much about it.
Yeah, man. I mean, you show up and you go through airborne. Like I came in with a RIP contract. I think it was like an 11 X-ray or something like that. So like I knew this was on the horizon, and you start hearing stories. You get through basic, you make it through basic, get to airborne, make it through airborne. And then you start to like really, there's always like worldwide, kids that got kicked out of RIP that came back. There's, how Fort Benning is. It's kind of just that ecosystem. And so you start hearing about it. And then the day they pick you up, you graduate airborne, go on a weekend pass, they pick you up, they drive a bus down there. And it's the normal thing from there. Like everyone shoves their bags on the bus. They make you run behind the bus to the actual RIP compound. And then it's just RIP was just, I think, mental hardening more than anything else. When I went through, it was 4 weeks. They've since increased, I believe, to 8, and they've put in a lot of. They do all like the advanced marksmanship. They do initial like basic demo quals. Now, back when I was going through, it was almost entirely physical. Like there were certain knowledge tests that you had to pass. I don't even remember if we shot. We might have done ARM at the backside, but like it's just kind of uniform drills. You're standing out on the, it used to be called the basketball courts, which was like this very, it was like right in front of the main barracks. It was surrounded by the blacked out fences with like barbed wire and everything. There was all kinds of like, it looked like kind of Camp Darby-ish with like poles and signs and memorials and all that stuff. And on the basketball court was where we would form up all the time. And if anything, and there was just, a massive amount of vomit and tears and probably some blood on that basketball court after every phase. I remember like a couple of funny stories. One, they would do this like forced hydration cycles on us. And so they'd like bring us out to the basketball court. You have to run around. You have like a rope slung, your 2-quart canteen slung. Like there's this like special rippy uniform that you got. And they would tell us like, all right, hey, everyone run around, fill up your 2 quarts. You've got 30 seconds. Everyone's of course late. You get the shit smoked out of you. You stand up. They're like, okay, drink. And then you basically down a 2-quart. You have to hold it above your head to where there's nothing coming out. And they do this over and over and over again. And no one really understood what like hyperhydration was back then. Like that was not but it was
that
just
radio contest hadn't happened yet.
Yeah. And like, it was just this round robin where we drain it and then we do something else, get fucked up for it. People like probably within the first 2 iterations, people started vomiting. And by the end of it, everyone was just kind of vomiting clear water because it was like, you were just, you were putting too much water in your stomach and doing that was something that was interesting. And then I think the culminating, like the thing I remember most is Cole Range, which is like the standard, any regiment folks that are listening will remember, they take you out to this kind of austere range. It's just a training area. It's where they do land nav. But they just basically it's a place to just play head games
away from the flagpole. Nobody can hear you scream.
Yeah. And like they'll do things like, there's this like sand pit and within about 50 meters, there was this big fire pit that the cadre used. And it would be like the middle of the night. They'd wake us up, make us put everything on, be running around in like concentric circles, opposing concentric circles inside of this pit with our rucks over our heads, like doing weird shit, like making everyone on the outside put their red lens on, everyone on the inside put their blue lens on, and just doing this over and over again, all while, they got a big bonfire, they've ordered pizzas, and the whole thing is just like, hey guys, like as soon as you say the word, like you can stop whatever we're doing, come over, get warm, get dry, have some pizza, just relax. And they're just trying to weed the quitters out. And that was like, I want to say that was like 4 days of pretty much continuous ops with very, very little sleep. And I'll never forget the funniest thing that happened. And the thing I'll never forget, I would always like, they would run you by the chow line and you'd have to pick up like 12 MREs at a time. Right. And this would last you for the training exercise. And so I would like always try and go and like get an angle and try and see the labels to get what, the best one on the top. Cause you can't rat fuck, right? Like that's I would kind of go, and this dude named Sergeant Herbert, who I will never forget, saw my eyes, like trying to scan for the menu. And he like grabs me and pulls me out of line. And he's like, you trying to fucking rat fuck? And of course I was like, you can't lie. So I get Roger that, Sergeant. And he's like, okay, cool. Go and rat fuck all those boxes. I want you to pick out 12 egg omelet MREs, and that's going to be all you eat for the next, for the rest of the training cycle. And so, I had a continuous flow of egg omelet MREs, which for anyone that doesn't know is arguably the worst MRE that has ever been brought to market. So there's a lot of fun things. I actually got kidnapped during land nav. That was something funny that we're reminiscing. So they did like, it was battle buddy pairs. We had started cloverleafing to try and find, it was like night land nav. We split cloverleafing to try and find a point. And one of the cadre like popped out of nowhere, under nods, put his hand over my mouth, drug me out of the woods, put me in a truck, and like put me in the like hut, the range hut. Right. For the next like 8 hours, they spun the whole class up like there was a dust one, and we're like legitimately like, yep, like you have lost one of your classmates, like we are blah blah blah, like put them all. They were doing Hands Across America, and I was just all the while like just getting the shit smoked out of them about how like, this is a learning point about like constantly having your battle buddy with you, this that. And I'm sitting in the shed listening to all this happen, just being like, what the fuck? This is I can't. But and then I walk out like. One of my classmates was this like good old boy from Alabama. And like 3 hours into it, he's like, Sergeant, I was out there. I think I was close to him and I heard them hogs. I don't know. The hogs might have got him. And like the whole class was like, holy shit, he just got killed by hogs. Yeah. there's this, and then they like open the door and I like traipse out, and it's just like, everyone's like, holy shit, we thought you were dead, man. And also fuck you for getting kidnapped because we just got the shit smoked out of us for like 8 hours.
Did they feed you?
No.
Similar
they
thing.
stuck me in a room.
A similar thing happened to me in seeingr survival school, where I don't know, I can't even remember why, but I was singled out as having committed some crime. I was brought up on trumped up charges, and they hauled me into a room. No, actually, they hauled me in front of everybody, and then hauled everybody else into a small room naked. Everybody was naked, and then somebody like shot a gun in the air, and then they didn't see me, and they put me in some isolation cell. And I think there was a shift change. I think they forgot about me, man. And like, they didn't give me any food, but I was in a little concrete box for like, it felt like 15 hours, which is a long time in that school. And eventually the thing opens, a little window, and one of the cadres, and goes, "Oh shit. Yeah. You're still here?"
That's funny.
I mean,
and you're like, you're kind of half racked out, and you're like, yeah, I'm still here, man. Like,
no, you kind of like, I kind of acted like, yes, I'm so thirsty and hungry. But it was pretty funny. And then when I came back, people were like, man, you missed so much.
Yeah. Like, 15 hours in here, like you can miss a significant amount of unpleasant things. Yeah. The boxes for me were, so like when they put you in the little box, and like I'm 6'4", and so I'm like crammed into this thing, and then I feel them like shoving the door to latch it. Yeah. And I just immediately passed out, like, cause my head was like low. So I was like, just passed out. I have no idea. It could have been 5 minutes, could have been 3 hours. And they like, I don't know if they did this down in McCall. They probably do worse things to you down in McCall, but at Rucker, like they pulled us out of the box and my whole body had gone to sleep. And there's like this psych that comes in and whispers, and she says whatever the safe word is. And she's like, hey, your body's, your whole body has lost circulation. You're going to be numb for a while. Just lay here and like shake it out and I just laid there and went right back to sleep. And it was a glorious break.
Yeah. People who never serve don't understand that you can lie down in 10 seconds, man. Oh yeah. You're like, oh, it's time to rack out. Boom. Doesn't matter where you are, what position you're in. Another little tangent. One of the funniest things, two funny things. And I think they happened with the same person. Anyways, this guy was Korean, an American soldier. Actually knew him pretty well, but he was in one of the cages that were stacked. They're like out in the middle, and they're like, I don't know, dog kennels.
Yeah, the open bar ones. Yeah.
Right. And he had to pee. And he was on the top. And the guy underneath him, who, if memory serves me correctly, was also Korean. Oddly enough. Anyways, was just like, oh, really? Really? Dude, that was brutal. Dude, just finish, man. Just finish. And he's like, I'm sorry. But then later they had him on a stump or some type of stand, and they were telling us to do something, and we weren't doing it right. And they made him point his finger at us and go, ha, 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 ha. And those two things really stick out to me as absolutely hilarious.
The story, I think the closest I came to the relief story, they get like, I don't know, did they give you the little Folgers cans when you're in the normal size boxes? They have little Folgers cans to take a piss in, and you've got your like, for us it was like the robes or whatever. We had like the burqas on. And I like would sit down, like when I knew they weren't walking around, I would like slink down the wall and like sit down. And one time I did that, and like a full corner of my like robe thing was just dipped in my own urine in the Folgers can. And I'm just standing there like, wow, that's a quarter of my robe is now wet in my own piss. This can't get any worse.
Yeah. What I'm about to tell you seems, looking back, absolutely crazy, but and disgusting. but in those boxes, we didn't have Folgers cans. It was all tilted downward, or so you could just like pee in it. Like I think it would go into a trough or something like that. But dudes are like, "Hey man, I have to pee. And I don't know.
You know that there's like a stream coming, right? Like there's something.
Dude, it gets worse. It gets worse. Anyways, what ended up happening is somebody decided, all right. And we had these little metal tin bowls that we would eat rice out of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so dudes were basically handing the people in the cells these little tin bowls, which everybody was eating out of. And they would relieve themselves in. And then, they would go, I don't know, wash them off. But then somebody was like, what are you people, stupid? Dude, just pee under the door, man. Yeah. I can go on and on about these crazy, like, types of adventures. But
I want to get back. Walk down memory road. That was good.
Yeah, memory lane is always fun to go down, man. So back to RIP. So anyways, you go through RIP. It sucks. It's torture. Then you have to go to your unit, which is, hey, new guy. And by the way, we just lost somebody. And by the way, also, you ain't shit.
Yep.
And if you have a girlfriend, can I like meet her? Do you have any sisters? Yep. Eventually, did you go on deployment pretty quick afterwards?
6 months. So I had it was actually pretty good. I had a full training cycle as at first I was an AG, and then by the time deployment hit, I was a machine gun team leader. And then went on first deployment. This was Baghdad 06. And then went through all the physical assessments for Ranger School, and then went straight from deployment to Ranger School. So I didn't have the key in regiment is to get your tab as quickly as possible because you stop getting fucked with. And so I was lucky to go through, I had the full experience of being a private training cycle deployment. And then from there I went to get the tab.
Yeah. And 06 Baghdad, I assume it didn't take too long to get your CIB.
No, I think it was we landed in Balad. Mm-hmm. And got everything situated, got our ISUs onto the I think we were sling loading them under a 47. And my squad leader was like, hey man, you're going to be the tail gunner of this 47. It was like a conventional 47 that had like the 50 on the tail.
No way. Yeah.
And I didn't get to, like, we started taking tracer fire over I think we were flying over, dude, I'm losing all my geography.
Taji.
It could have been. I'm trying to remember where Balad was. Anyway, we were flying. We started taking tracer fire and shit like that, and it was kind of intermittent. And I remember being like, "This is fucking crazy. Like this is like,
can I shoot my gun?"
Yeah. Like I think I probably was within where I could have engaged, but I probably was just I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean? I was just like, "Oh god, this is crazy." But that was a cool. I mean, all three of those deployments were pretty cool, very kinetic. That was a cool one because we were at we were co-located and did some pretty cool joint missions. But it happened pretty quickly.
Right on, yeah. And then, excuse me. And then off to Ranger School where, hey, by the way, you're still a dirtbag, right? I don't care if, you're in regiment.
You're an extra dirtbag. You're definitely a dirtbag if you're a bat boy in Ranger School.
And also you're in charge of everything.
Yeah. Right? Thankfully that was, I just look back on the whole kind of the first couple of years in the military, and it was very, my girlfriend would disagree that this stuck, but it was very humbling. It's just kind of, it really does break you down in a lot of ways, in ways I think were really good. Like Ranger School was a similar thing. I think the toughest thing about Ranger School is just the uncertainty of how long you're going to be there. Like,
right.
I think, and I stand
being
by
at regiment, you could have been there for like 2 years, right?
You just stay. Like the choice is you either come home with your tab or you get RFS. And there's some like, medical stuff. But it's like they put the fear of God in you. Like if you don't go get your shit, you go home, you go down the street. And that to me was, the uncertainty of, waiting until the end of every phase to figure out if you got your go and you're going on to the next one. And I stand by, it's dumbass luck who gets straight through Ranger School and who recycles 10 times. Like it is, maybe there's a threshold. If you're recycling too many times, like maybe there's an issue, but for the most part, like you get a good patrol and the next guy could get just a horrible, group of cadre.
Machine gunner fell asleep.
Dude, you name it, man. Like there are some teams out there, some RI teams that just fail everyone. And it's just like it's part of the game. It's like the same, it's the opposite of like the golden patrol where they walk you out and put you to sleep and give you candy. There are some teams out there that are just like the enforcers and you can't do anything right. And if your number gets called for a patrol that day, and that's the only one that you get for the phase, you're just going to recycle.
Yeah. That's a bummer. What'd you learn? What'd you learn in these first 2 years, other than humility? Is, I learned. I don't know. Walk away from that experience thinking you could think two things. You made it through, obviously. Did you make it without recycling?
Yeah.
Nice. But you could either walk away thinking, hey, that was good stuff. And I'm glad I did it. Or a lot of people walk away like, dude, that is so stupid. What a waste of time.
Yeah. I think, I tend to be pretty optimistic. And I also tend to want to look at, like, I don't spend a lot of energy looking at things in hindsight, and I probably put on rose-colored glasses more often than not, or I'll like
drink that Kool-Aid sometimes.
Things, like I'll try and highlight the good lessons. Like I went through this process, kind of on a macro scale during the retirement process of like there were things from the military that just left a super bad taste in my mouth, and then there were a bunch of other things that I'm like deeply thankful for having been exposed to and gone through and had the opportunity to, to do these things and learn from circumstances and people. And I think like the first, I look back on the process of coming from being a civilian to being, a tabbed, team leader in Ranger Regiment and everything that happens in between there. And I honestly wouldn't have changed a thing. Yeah. I would have changed some of my own behaviors. Like, I was a, ruffian, I think would be one way of putting it. Like I would come back from deployments and just do stupid shit. Like I was 20 years old going 180 miles an hour on a motorcycle and getting arrested. And like, it's all the normal, like it's the normal things that you'd expect 20-year-olds that have underdeveloped frontal lobes and are going constantly back and forth to,
combat,
to fight wars. It's the things that like seem a little bit normal, but they were still like,
it's weird, man. It's like, and it's new for not necessarily just our generation. Well, it is. Bottom line, it is, right. The folks who grew up without cell phones in their pockets, had and then went off to war, had a new experience. Yeah. Okay. So in Vietnam, dudes would go in for a year or whatever. It wasn't like World War II in Korea where they were just there. But this idea that a 20-year-old with a little bit of money from deployment has this duty pay and a motorcycle, who, by the way, 2 weeks ago was told, hey, go shoot anything that moves in that compound. Now you're in Tacoma, or Columbus, and expected to behave. It's scary, and I think we actually came out of it not unscathed, but it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, I agree, and I think like as a leader in that organization, like you have to have like it was. I got. One of the reasons that I was able to, or I took the opportunity to go to West Point, just full transparency. I got back from my third deployment. Everything was good. And then I went and got arrested, going 160, racing my girlfriend down I-5. Like
Wow.
I don't know, like a month after I got back from deployment. And
go to West Point or go to jail, buddy.
It was go to West Point or get RFS'd and go down the street and be at like, second ID. And like, thank God, I count my lucky stars because my chain of command, like my first sergeant commander were fucking solid. And we had a great working relationship. Like they knew that I was at least like on deployment on target. I wasn't an idiot. And they, we worked together really well. And so they went to bat and basically like sat on my RFS packet for long enough for me to like square things away, getting into West Point. Like the commander helped me get into West Point.
Right?
Dude, it was, but like to the point of, regiment has standards and they uphold them. And so it didn't matter what position I was in, what I did on deployment. Like I went out and did some really dumb shit, in my off time that on like deeper reflection was, I think, just symptomatic of some other, issues, but
acting out.
Yeah. And so we asked these people, to put their lives on the line, and they're young people. Like I think the difference between some of the tier 1 units is that you have a lot more experience. I think to a certain extent, SF is this way as well. You have older, more experienced people that have they're more established in life. They've got families, they've got mortgages, they've got all the things that are like tempering, for our behaviors. But like as kind of type A adrenaline junkie type of people, like you need some structure around your life to keep you as a single dude living in the barracks, got a bunch of disposable income, and all I do is train and go back and forth to work and and go back and forth on deployments. There's not a lot of things that are constraining that type of, that behavior. And you want people that are risk risk tolerant, that are willing to like put themselves in danger. The key, I think, is vectoring that energy towards productive things and helping to mitigate it when it's, I used to do some wild shit skydiving when I was not qualified to do it, like, and have paid dear prices physically for those things, but it all stems from the same, like, and as I've gotten older, as I got married, got divorced, I'm now in a committed relationship that's leading towards another marriage. We're talking about kids and all these things, financial responsibilities, relationship responsibilities, like those all have really, really calmed me down in a way that, you just can't expect for a 19-year-old kid to have the same control.
Yeah. No human being really possesses that ability to make life-changing choices at that age. It's crazy that they give the 18-year-olds guns and tell them to go off to war. It's crazy that they let 18-year-olds vote. Let's just be honest, right? but also I'm at the same time, I'm thinking like, hey, an 18-year-old ought to have a beer, man, if he's serving in the military, and I mean, for anybody who's deployed or anybody who hasn't deployed, here's something informative. 9 out of 10 trips, you stop in Europe somewhere. Oh, yeah. You leave your base in America. Normally you stop. Oh, and you can't drink at Fort Lewis or Fort Benning or wherever. You stop for 12, 18 hours in Germany. And guess what the first thing you do? You go to a bar or to the shop at if you can't go anywhere, and you just get hammered, man. It's just like it conditions folks to have that binge mentality of alcohol. Oh, and I think that's something that a lot of us character and have to eventually learn how to quit. Like, oh, well, hey, I'm deploying next week. I should get really hammered right now. And then when you're a little bit older, you're like, I don't want to feel like shit for 3 days. But I still do it. So I want to talk a little bit about your transition. But before I do that, the other thing I want to unpack is, were you like a beautiful mind or a troublemaker at 14 to get out of high school?
At 14? No, I definitely wasn't a beautiful mind. I raced motocross. Like my sport was motocross as a kid. And I by the time I was 14, I was racing nationally. So I was like traveling around to, I lived in Arizona, but I'd travel to California, Washington, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Florida, Texas. Like, so I was just on the road all the time. And, I just missed so much school. The first semester of my freshman year, I just missed so much school that the administrator was like, hey man, like to my dad. Was like, hey, like he's either got to come to school and like actually be in school, or he's not going to graduate. My biological father wasn't the paragon of education or valuing those types of things. And he was like, fuck it, we'll just pull him out. And so for like 3 years, I did this. It was like a homeschooling program where they would just send you a PDF packet of like a couple hundred pages, which was like your semester's work. Yeah. And my dad would just hand me that and be like, here you go, finish this. I would get on like the early Google search engine, Google my way through this for like 2 weeks, finish it, send it back in. So I didn't go to school for 3 years. And I was just racing dirt bikes. I mean, when I was at that age, it was like the dream, right? Like every kid's dream is to say, but it definitely had some costs down the line. So I definitely don't advocate for dropping out of high school.
Yeah. So what does that look like on transcripts for like college?
Nothing. I don't have any. I have a GED.
So and West Point was like, dude, let's take a risk on this guy.
Well, I took I guess so. I think I maxed I got like an unreasonably high score on the SAT, and I think I maxed the ACT. And so with those things plus 3 deployments, E5 coming out of Ranger Regiment, they were able to excuse all the like spotty history and they were able to excuse not only my spotty high school history, but an arrest record as well. Right. So
you know what? So often from Vietnam and from even World War II in Korea, the people who, battlefield commissions and stuff are people just like you, right? Who, pretty smart guys, able to perform on the battlefield and able to lead for some reason. And I think you need that variety. I mean, you don't need a bunch of nerds knocking their rings everywhere, and
wait, let me show you that. There you go.
For the listeners at home, he is getting up and doing something. Let's see. There's the ring.
There it is.
Nice. Are you forced to buy that?
No, I actually, oddly enough, man, I drank the Kool-Aid a little bit there. I really, I'm very thankful for West Point. And I think it was for all the.
I wish I went. What a great school and no student debt.
Yep. That's a critical part of it. And I think I think that the stereotype of West Pointers coming out and being ring knockers and kind of being out of touch with reality and entitled, like that's all very well deserved. And I think,
to an extent,
it is like, you see, there's all kinds of stuff. Like there's a kid right now on social media that just keeps getting torn up because he's like a second lieutenant butter bar coming out of West Point. But he's like doing all these, like self-promotion on LinkedIn and like these West Point oral history interviews where it's and that's like the picture that people have in their heads of what a West Point officer is. But
his dad was a senator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know if but and it's stuff like that kind of taints it. But on the same token, like my best friends in the world are all from West Point and they're all normal dudes. Like I gravitated towards the lacrosse team, which is not widely regarded as being a house of geniuses. Yeah. But what it is a bunch of like blue collar, good dudes, that work their asses off on the field. They really don't give a shit about school. They party insanely hard, even for cadets. But they're all just generally, and now they're all really great guys. Some of them are still in, some of them got out. All of them are successful and they're all just really good people. And that's, I think,
I would say my experience with academy graduates is more positive than negative. I've had a couple along the way where I'm like, oh man, this dude showing me pictures of his vacation home. I don't like, bro.
Tone deaf, just a little tone deaf.
Yeah, exactly. Or the others are great. My favorite team leader grew up in Maine, and got one of Maine's slots, I guess, that year, and just an interesting guy. And we had a good time on ODA together. And now he's out doing God's work somewhere else. But he was a great dude, and he was a West Pointer, and as were many other folks that I served with that I really learned a lot from. So back to you transition. Well, in the story of your life, this is your life. Alex. It's just really great to dive into, what makes people tick and the decisions that people make. But you went to West Point, got out of there, and we'd had a conversation before about this, but your experience as a lieutenant and your experience in the regular Army kind of informed your decision to eventually get out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the chronology there is interesting. Like I got out of West Point, and instead of going to IBOLIC and doing the kind of normal lieutenant PL, battalion staff, PL, XO type of a thing, I actually went to 2 years of grad school in the UK, and like took all the experiences before West Point. You don't really process things at West Point per se. Like you start to process, I think, but
you don't have time to process it. You don't have time. Yeah. It's designed that way, right?
There's not a lot of, reflection that goes on there too, other than like purposeful. So like writing, applying to the scholarship programs and all that stuff, you have to do some reflection on like personal statement and your life's narrative, but it's all very much like aimed at like winning the scholarship. So there's not a lot of real honest introspection that goes on there. It's like very much selling yourself. When I got to the UK, I did a master's degree, lived in London for a year, and had just an inordinate amount of time, free time, which was good. But I think that started the ball rolling. This was at the same time that ISIS invaded Western and Northern Iraq, and when Mosul fell. So Mosul fell, I believe it was June 2014. And then I started my master's degree in September, and I was supposed to study like economic development and I like did a hard, like the fall of Mosul, like kicked me in the stomach. Cause these were all AQI guys that we'd been fighting, years beforehand so I started digging into civil conflict. I started digging into a lot of like irregular warfare stuff academically, focusing a lot around counterinsurgency. Started digging into like the politics of civil conflict and all that. And that kind of led me on a direction I was supposed to do an MBA my second year. Instead, I dropped that and went and did a PhD, lived up in Belfast. And like, cause I had to answer, looking in hindsight now, I was just obsessed with this question of like, how the fuck could we let something like this happen? Like, how could we let something like ISIS happen and all of the kind of ramifications for that? And so I ended up doing this like very solitary year up in Belfast, where it was kind of just me and a shitload of books in my computer and like this revolving circle of bottles of bourbon coming in and out of the kitchen.
Interesting place to study an insurgency too.
Dude, it was cool. I mean, that's why I picked it. But you kind of live in it. And this was also around the time of the 2016 presidential election. There's just a lot going on. And yeah, like that really, having a deep understanding of the process through which we were able to withdraw from Iraq the way that we did. And kind of like really kind of digging deep into the causal chain from kind of invasion, counterinsurgency, like the rise of Coin, Petraeus, all that stuff, withdrawal, and then the subsequent, reemergence of ISIS really shook my confidence in, at a political level, I think, at a policy making level. And then, going back over for the ISIS fight as a PL, I left Belfast all but dissertation done. So I was still writing. I was in Sharqat, which is a suburb of Mosul, when the Eastern and Western fronts were collapsing. So we were basically like double enveloping ISIS for that Old Town fight. And so it was like 6 months of really cool, like launching tow missiles off of rooftops and shit like that. But at night I would come back and I'd be writing my chapters. And the cognitive dissonance could not have been more acute. Like I'm sending my dudes, like, one of the guys in our task force got shot up by the IA, like sending people out in to do these dangerous things. And like, there's no guarantee that this, like in my mind, I was like, there's no guarantee that this is ever going to stick.
Right.
And unfortunately, that trend continued in Afghanistan recently, where that it was borne out again. But that really kind of put a sour taste in my mouth. I came back, and and like kind of stuffed that into a closet, if you will, and kept on, like went to the career course, had all these, I had an SFAS packet dropped, pulled that for marriage reasons. And then, I was planning to try and go take the long walk, just like everyone else that has like, seen that side of things. But then I got up here and got into, I was the chief of plans for a conventional brigade combat team. And it was like the worst job I've ever had in my life. Like I was deep in depression. I was the unhealthiest I've ever been. It was just a horrible, horrible experience. And that, and then I went into command thinking that command was going to be much better. And like really that kind of just solidified some things for me in terms of the way that I thought about it.
I think it's helpful to pause here for people who don't know. Officers have a track, and you have a very small window to put in an SFAS packet. Yep. Or any type of packet, really. It's long walks. You're on this train, buddy. So strap in, and it sounds like circumstance almost dictated some things. It sounded like maybe you would have chosen some different things or whatnot, but there you are on this path and you're not happy.
I was super, super, super unhappy. And I mean, this was right around the time, like my first marriage was falling apart. Like everything was just kind of,
you're like, man, I should have went to SFAS.
Yeah. It was a dark time, but I honestly think that, I mean, it's what triggered me to start getting, start frankly just going to therapy. Like it triggered a lot of, I went through about a year and a half of mental health treatment after kind of like, taking a knee or leaving the track, which I don't think, had I not done that, I like, it's questionable where I would be today.
Yeah. By leaving the track, you mean you decided I
left command. I like literally 8 months into command. I was signing Article 15s, and I was like so fucked up in the head. And I had this like moment of clarity, and I was like, I am everything, like marriage is falling apart. I am like deeply unhappy in this job. I'm deeply unhappy with the everything. Right. I am not in a position to have like profound, like financial and legal impacts on people's lives. Like the UCMJ authority, like I don't take that shit lightly. And that was like my like, I just like kind of snapped, I guess. And I literally walked up to the battalion commander, my boss, and I was like, hey, sir, I need to leave command. And of course, like the next conversation is with my senior rater, the brigade commander, who both of them were absolutely amazingly supportive. Like,
interesting.
I basically said, I gave like a 3-minute spiel to my brigade commander, and he looked at me and he was like, you need help. We're going to, he's basically like, we're putting your XO on assumption of command orders. And
wow. No, you don't hear that often. I would have assumed they'd have been like, oh man, we have this dude on paper who looks like the golden child. And now we got a problem. Get out of my office, loser. But it sounds like they were supportive. Were they also part of the root cause, or was it these different folks?
No, there wasn't like this was not there was not one single root cause to this. Like the battalion commander and brigade commander were fine. Like they're not, the unit, this is, and it's also, it should be noted, like this is not, really unhealthy units from like a command climate perspective, or not even a command climate, just like a culture perspective.
Culture. Yeah.
Are they're everywhere right now in the Army, in the conventional, in the field Army. And this is not this is a function of a whole bunch of different things that are coalescing right now, like the rise of social media, the empowerment of like, it's very hard to have like a very disciplined, in my opinion, this may be unpopular with some people, but I don't think you can really have like a very, very highly disciplined fighting force without some like threat of fear or
reprisals.
Like this is why, like, I really don't agree with how far the pendulum has swung on like hazing policies and stuff like that. Like I don't think we should be shoving broomsticks where they shouldn't be going, or anything weird, like the stuff that injures people. But like getting yelled at and smoked for an hour, or like,
shame goes a long way, man.
Yeah. But now like and so I was very unhappy with just a lot of things. And this all kind of came at a time when there's just a bunch of stuff going on in my life. And so, but the end result was, the chain of command was incredibly supportive. I got a shitload of treatment that I had been needing for a long time. And I will always respect the people that allowed that to happen, respect the Army as an institution that set up the processes for that type of mental health support. And I will forever be grateful for it.
That's awesome, man. A lot of people get out in similar circumstances and, they get a FTA tattoo and just run their mouth. And it's like, regardless of how you feel about the military, it provides so many people an opportunity to get out of poverty or to 100%. Get out of horrible circumstances, myself included. I have a life that I thank God every day for the Army and the person it helped me grow into. Right. But, something that you touched on there about culture and units, man, I'm so glad you said that because it's something I've been trying to put my finger on. And again, for people who don't know, there's units in the military that people want to go to. If you're a line infantryman, you want to go to the 82nd Airborne, maybe the 101st.
Yeah.
If you're in regiment, where you want to be, I don't want to put words in your mouth, everybody, but most people who go to regiment want to end up at a certain battalion, most likely.
That or, most of the go-getters at regiment have dreams of going to take the walk.
Yeah.
It's like the pinnacle.
Mm-hmm. But then there's these units that for decades have been known. Now, I'm not going to say anything by name, but you're just like, oh man, there's one in Texas. There's one. There's a big one in Texas where people are
there's one right here. There's one where I'm living.
There's one where you live. Yeah. And they're just multiculturally doomed for mediocrity at best. And and you look at some of the counseling packages. I think if you follow U.S. Army What the Fuck Moments on Instagram or whatever, you'll see they all come from the same units. It seems like.
Well, and I think that it's a population. It's a question of the population of the units, right? Yeah. And I didn't understand this. On the front side of it, they made this huge deal of Rangers and SF are 3-time volunteers. They keep going through these gates. And I didn't really have, I think, a full picture of how that played out. But then I spent 4 years in Ranger Regiment. And I spent, a year of my PL, my 1 year of PL time. Mm-hmm. I was in the 82nd, which was a significant step down in terms of quality of soldier, quality of leader, quality of unit process, all that stuff. But it was still a pretty good, it's still a pretty good unit. It still had some hitters in the squads,
history too.
Yep. Storied history. And then I got to the Striker Brigade and,
shouts out.
It's a bunch of man. And it's not to say it's not to detract from anyone's service, but there is a different type of a person that wants to go jump out of an airplane and then go get fucked around with for whatever the selection process is. Than there is with people that just join the Army and are kind of content or unable to advance for whatever reason, physical, mental, whatever the case is. And it really, really profoundly impacts the performance level of the unit on a quantitative basis. It really impacts the culture. And then you layer on top of all of that kind of the political issues that we're having right now, the cultural wars that are happening in the United States, the kind of transfer of power from people in authority to people with smartphones that are kind of it's reversed this. It's reversed the flow of I guess impact and authority and influence to where now commanders are terrified because they have all these sanctions coming on top of them. And by the way, if one of their soldiers takes a video of them doing something or goes to IG for getting yelled at or smoked or whatever, send it exactly. Put something on what the fuck. Brigade commanders are terrified of what the fuck moments because they just air out brigade commanders dirty laundry. Yeah. And that's all of that stuff has really, I think, combined. There's always going to be a much higher performing individual in soft units. on balance, but there are things that are fascinating. Yeah. There are still shitbags for sure. But the proportion of shitbags to hitters is much different.
Yeah. And he's saying hitters as in pipe hitters, as in meat eaters, as in the opposite of vegetarians. And these are all terms that folks use. I mean, okay, I don't want to discredit anybody. So just like you said, people join the military, we have logisticians, we have signalers, we have medical staff, intel, all these things. And I like to think that most people will join the military out of a sense of wanting to serve. But having been a former non-combat arms, I joined, by the way, during peacetime. And let me tell you, shining my boots and like starching my uniform was of utmost importance. And you're just like, wow. And you kind of see that now. Okay. So we have some wars, we have some conflicts going on, but right now the the vast majority of the military is bored with access to smartphones in their pockets all day. And you can see it. And all these dumb things are coming back where shit that really doesn't matter. And, it's disguised as part of discipline or whatever. But in the end, it's just like, you're bored.
Yep.
And bored leaders make dumb decisions and bored soldiers make really dumb decisions.
And it's like it's the classic, like people like to disparage millennials for wanting to have a sense of purpose. But I think that, the perception in the mid 2000s was like, holy shit, like we are doing something very meaningful over there. Like we are correcting like a massive blunder in Iraq. Mm-hmm. There's forward progress in Afghanistan. Like we are helping these people. We are protecting, the homeland and the broader kind of, world from Salafi jihadist terrorism and all this stuff. Right. And we over the years, we have been proven wrong in those assumptions, just measured by outcomes, right? Like all the stuff we can say, and we can say we had all the best laid plans and intentions and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, Iraq is borderline failed state. Afghanistan is now under control of the very people that we went over there to oust. Mm-hmm. There are more like the dispersion of, terrorists and insurgents across, ungoverned spaces from, the Middle East and North Africa has only gotten exponentially worse. Yeah. And America doesn't seem to be in any better position. In fact, we seem to be significantly disadvantaged relative to where we were, September 10th, 2001, and relative to our peer competitors now. And I think when you combine all of that, it makes it really difficult. It's a challenge to keep soldiers engaged in like drinking the Kool-Aid and doing the harder, like it's such a trope, but like doing the harder right over the easier wrong, right? Yeah. Like training, like squeezing out that one last rep, like, gassing yourself on a run, really taking marksmanship seriously, like trying to advance yourself in, schools and whatnot. Like everyone's kind of treating the Army as a paycheck right now, because I don't think that the same level of like the feeling of having an impact and having a purpose exists anymore for reasons that are completely external to the Army itself. Yeah. Now leaders, I think like, leaders in the Army and people that are helping to work through what I'm kind of like comparing as like a post-Vietnam, Army transition, right? Like we're in like a rebuilding transition phase. There's a responsibility for them to understand these challenges, not to like, I don't think that we should wish them away. I don't think that we should make excuses for why, like everyone in the Army is really hesitant to say anything political, for the whole like apolitical kind of chain of command thing. But at the end of the day, like we have to acknowledge politics. Yeah. We have to acknowledge what's going on in our country, what's going on in on the global stage, where we fit into that and how that might be affecting morale. Because I really think at the end of the day, if you want to boil it down to one word, which I think sometimes gets overused, but is applicable here, is we're just having a morale crisis in the Army. That's what it felt like to me. And and stuff like when you're watching Afghan civilians, falling 500 feet to their death after trying to escape their country, in the landing gear of a C-17 after we had made all kinds of promises that, to the contrary, like that was a tough day.
Yeah.
And I think there's, a fighting force cannot go through too many major events like that without starting to have some cracks in the facade of morale and kind of, purpose.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. We can say that it's been, I don't know, with the exception of Desert Storm, we haven't really had a big W.
Yeah.
That despite the fact that on the tactical level, we hardly ever have L's.
Yep.
We win every engagement. The world's is a complicated place, man, and one other thing about the discipline I was looking at is, I pay attention to social media and I watch stuff online, and there's no respect for authority in this country anymore. And the big no shit is a lot of the people who you see in these videos are the population that's going to come into the United States military because, they don't have a lot of options or, they want money for college, want a better life. But, the kid who doesn't comply at a traffic stop is the same kid who's not going to listen to his platoon sergeant.
Yep.
And so that culture leaks in. And I think as a nation, we have a significant problem with that. And it's one thing that makes me nervous about this country, about America, is just, you do need some authority out there, and you need to have respect for authority. And I think that's fallen by the wayside. But let's talk about your transition, because this is where I think the meat and potatoes of this is you had an interesting transition, and I don't want to call it your come to Jesus moment, or your moment of clarity where that led you to get into the field you're in. Can you talk a little bit about transition and that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started transitioning about 9 months ago, maybe, in earnest. But some background story. So I discovered Bitcoin in 2000, like when I really discovered it and started getting exposure to it was in 2017. There was like a bull run that happened there as well. So I remember got back from Iraq, and actually my Uber driver told me about it. And I had heard about it before, but I was on, post block leave, whatever, and had some time. And so I started messing around with it and started investing in it. And I didn't really understand. There's it takes a long time to really fully understand Bitcoin, but I understood that it kept going higher and I was making a lot of money, at least on paper. And then it went through this big crash in 2018, and I was moving on to doing other things in the Army, and I kind of forgot about it. I started coming back to it in March of 2020 when the COVID lockdown hit. We all saw our portfolios blow up, right? If you're an investor in March 2020, you were down 50% probably in that flash crash. And then I saw my undergrad training is in economics, and I saw what they were doing with all the stimulus, and I was starting to pay attention. And simultaneously, I started seeing the Bitcoin price rise again noticeably. And I was like, wait a minute, I think I have some of that. And so I went on, and it was just kept on an exchange hot wallet because I didn't know what I was doing. But then I started paying more attention to it. And so I would spend half of my mental energy as I started considering retirement or considering what life after the Army would be. I was spending half my time looking at, I went through the classic well, I don't have any hard skills. I can go be a consultant. I can go try and be, an investment banker. There's this kind of trend for soft guys to get out and go straight into private equity or venture capital to a certain extent. So I started looking at all that. And then I transitioned to looking at tech jobs, and I was looking at Apple and Google and trying to I didn't know what I wanted to do. The other half of my time during this time, completely unrelated, was just obsessing over Bitcoin. And learning everything I possibly could about it, reading all the papers, reading all the blogs, reading all the articles, research reports, trying to understand the technology, understanding cryptography, like understanding money. Like you have to start, if you really want to understand Bitcoin, like the first place that you have to start is understanding money as a technology. And so I started doing all that. And it came time to really start looking hard at doing the SkillBridge internship, which is like how, a lot of folks can help transition out. And I was like agonizing over it. And I was, looking at, I didn't know what I was going to do. And my girlfriend looked at me and she was like, dude, you just need to go work in Bitcoin. Like just find a job in Bitcoin. Because you're obsessed with it. Like you won't shut up about it. It's all you think about. It's all you read.
You're really going at dinner parties, Alex.
Yeah. Like you're the weird, like she has to, you're the weird crypto guy that always brings this up. So you might as well like put your money where your mouth is. And I was like, shit, she's actually right. And so I kind of started like trying to network in. Like I didn't know anyone that worked in the industry. Like it's really hard to find people, especially back. This was. What was this, like a year ago, I guess. It was hard to find people that you knew. That
it's like, what's a Bitcoin job?
Yeah. And so I just started like, LinkedIn, networking, like people in the network, people from school, whatever, just trying to find openings. And I literally started to realize that I wanted to get into mining specifically because of the function that it plays or the role that it plays in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And the fact that it kind of bridges between the digital world and the physical world because of all the energy infrastructure and there's like a physical component to it. And so I DM'd the CEO of Luxor on Twitter, Nick, and it was just like, there was a wild, like I was LinkedIn stalking him and I found out that he raced dirt bikes back at the same time that we raced. And then he was from Colorado, blah, blah, blah. And I just shot him a note and I was just kind of like, hey man, I'm looking for any help, any help that you can give me in terms of understanding the industry. Just would love to chat and pick your brain. And like attached my CV inside of a Twitter DM. And that's how I like reached out to this company. And within about 2 weeks, I had gone through interviews with all the founders and then ended up coming on the team. And it was just like, it was just kind of a perfectly lucky thing that happened where it was like the right DM got sent to the right person at the right company. I mean, Luxor is this amazing company in the space, like, very, very much kind of plugged into the center of all of it. And then since then I did 6 years as basically an unpaid intern, on the SkillBridge, like the Army.
6 months.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You say years. I was like, damn, that's a hell of an internship.
6 months. Sorry. Yeah. No, 6 months. And then, came on full time once I actually exited the Army, but it's just been this like whirlwind learning experience. Yeah. And like to think back where I was a year ago in terms of my understanding of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining specifically in the industry and kind of the trends and where it's going, just it's been mind blowing. Great.
What's the first thing they asked you to do as an intern? Besides make the coffee, take out the trash.
No, make money, go out and make money, find ways of making money. Like they literally hired me as the vice president level, first non-founding executive hire. And they're like, just sit and learn as much as you possibly can, find what interests you and go out and help us monetize it. And so I've just had, like, there's some standard things, like we're a mining pool. So I go out and like part of my job is finding miners to connect to our pool and send us the hash rate. And we do some other things, but like really, I've had kind of a blank slate to go out and try new business lines and build, like basically generate revenue.
Yeah. For those not, myself included, who are experts on Bitcoin or just very casual observers, what is mining? And try not to be too technical.
Yeah. Mining is really just the way that new Bitcoin is produced. Like new Bitcoins are produced, they're brought in. And really what mining is, on the physical side of things, it is a bunch of computers that are designed to do one thing, which is basically guess numbers on this blockchain. They consume a massive amount of electricity, and the more computers are mining on the blockchain, the more secure the network is. So they serve a security function. So it prevents things like double spends and all that stuff. And then they arrange miners actually take. So if you wanted to send me Bitcoin, you would, go onto whatever wallet app you use, enter my address, hit send. That transaction would then go into like a waiting line for a miner to come by. If the miner, like the individual miner, guesses the right number in that math problem I was talking about, like the cryptographic math problem, they then get the ability to assemble all those transactions into a block. So like when you think about blockchains, it's just blocks of transactions that are, contiguous down to the original block on like the main chain. And so the miners, organize those transactions and propagate them throughout the network. And so really the two functions is they secure the network from attacks, and produce net new Bitcoin through the consumption of electricity. This is this is like where proof of work comes in. The proof of work is literally, it's called hashing. It's each one of these chips hashing trillions of times a second, guessing these numbers. And then that consumes a lot of electricity. And then, the miner that guesses the right number for that round, that block round, gets the ability to assemble all the transactions. As a reward for all of that, they get paid out, the new Bitcoin. And there's some nuances there with how pools function, but that's basically the long and short of it.
Yeah. Still very confused. No.
I know. And it's partially because I definitely don't have the greatest elevator pitch for this. I think
it's probably the best that there can be, without getting too metaphoric,
Yeah.
But Bitcoin is okay. So here's my understanding of Bitcoin in 30 seconds is Bitcoin is a blockchain.
Yeah.
And that thing can be divided billions of ways, or I could own like 0.00002 of a Bitcoin, but they don't make new Bitcoin. Is that right?
So there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin produced ever, and that's like it's built into the code. So
is that different type of Bitcoin? Like there's Bitcoin, and then there's a Bitcoin called something else, and then
no, this is just Bitcoin. Yeah, there's like Bitcoin is one like cryptocurrency. There's of which there are thousands. Bitcoin,
Ethereum, and all that stuff. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay. So Bitcoin and are all these different digital currencies only issued a certain number, X amount of numbers? They don't it's not like inflation where they like the government can't like flood the Bitcoin market to make it more make more money.
That's the primary. So Bitcoin is the only one that is programmatically and verifiably constrained to 21 million Bitcoin, which means that it is deflationary, right? So there is a new Bitcoin right now are being produced. So like 90% of the Bitcoin that's ever been, 90% of the Bitcoin that will ever be produced has already been produced and is in circulation or is in storage. The next 10% will emit over the next 119 years, I guess, 118 years. And there's a whole, but it's like it decreases, the emission schedule decreases over time, but there's a hard cap. So we know, and you can audit the entire blockchain at your, you can go onto a block explorer and you can audit every single transaction that has gone back down to the Genesis block, which was January 3rd, 2009. So what this means is, and the big selling point for Bitcoin, in the context of kind of unconstrained government money printing and, expansion of the monetary supply and all the inflation that has come along with that, is that Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation. Not only is it a hedge against inflation, but it's a monetary system that cannot be debased. Like there's no governing body or decision board or individual that can say we're going to produce 2 million more Bitcoin because we need to increase the supply and bail this person out or provide stimulus for this person. And then the other part of it is just like as a function of it being a certain type of a blockchain, like they're called consensus protocols. You can't prevent someone from spending Bitcoin. Like you can't censor transactions. Right. You can't confiscate. I can hold all of my wealth. Like all of my wealth could be on a thumb drive. I mean, I could literally it would be unwise to do this, but you can hold all of your wealth in Bitcoin on what essentially amounts to a thumb drive. This is a cold storage wallet, and there's no counterparty in between me and my money. So right now, if Chase wanted to, or whatever bank they could freeze all of our funds. And unless you're holding a shitload of cash in your safe at home, like you do not have access to money. There's significant counterparty risk there. There's risk of being, there's censorship risk. And there's seizure risk. So like when you think about, and this isn't really all that germane to the conversation in the United States right now, but in countries where they're experiencing currency crises and currency collapses, typically what they'll try and do is they'll try and enact capital controls first to prevent, wealth from fleeing the country. Right. And it's pretty easy to do. Like you can even do it with gold. It's really hard to transfer like $100,000 worth of gold across a border without being, caught. So even physical custody of other bearer assets is really difficult. Whereas Bitcoin, like I can literally put all my wealth on that thumb drive, memorize 12 or 24 words, lose that thing, have it stolen, walk across a border naked as a refugee, get to the other side, find a new wallet, put that seed phrase in and recover all of my wealth. Oh, right. Wow. So it's pretty crazy. Or you get knocked on the head and never get to see your wealth again. And you're fucked. Yeah. 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 There's definitely a like personal responsibility aspect of transitioning onto like what we call a Bitcoin standard. Like if you are really going to custody your own, they call it holding your own keys. Yeah. Like you have to have systems in place to like reduce key man risk and there are some attack vectors and some risk vectors there as well. But I mean, overall, like to get back to your initial question, like what makes Bitcoin distinct is really its core value proposition is the fact that it can't be debased. Yeah. Do you know a lot of veterans who are investing in Bitcoin? They probably do because they all probably bug the shit out of you, right? Which I'm happy. I love it. I love getting. We'll talk later. We'll talk later. I have like $20 in savings. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, a lot of them are investing. Increasingly, a lot of them are trying to come into the space through whatever routes, and that's like one of the things I love doing is connecting folks, connecting good folks coming out of the military with interesting companies in the crypto space. And full disclosure, I don't know a lot about altcoins. I don't know a lot about like the Solanas and the Ethereums and stuff of the world. Like it's pretty much constrained to mining, but one of the benefits of being in this job is it's given me the ability to meet a lot of really interesting people in the space and develop relationships. And what I try to do whenever I get the opportunity is leverage those to help make introductions for, veterans who I think would be a good fit and to try and get into the space. Cause it is it's a small space. It's a pretty kind of insular one to a certain extent. And it's a little bit hard to break into. It's like not a lot of our normal networking groups kind of have a lot of overlap there, but I really love. Are you putting yourself out there? I can put out your LinkedIn and people can bomb you. Dude, I don't mind 100%. Yeah. Like I really don't mind answering questions. Like I'm not just going to pass along. And I think everyone that's listening to this can understand and respect this. Like I'm not going to just de facto pass along introductions, but I would love to meet and chat with anyone that's interested. And if there's a good fit there, I am happy to spend the time to do that. Yeah. And for listeners out there, we're having this conversation because we, Alex and I are, associated through a organization of soft people, mainly pilots. And I just said, hey, does anybody know anything about Bitcoin and we would be willing to talk on a podcast? And a couple of people said, oh yeah, you got to talk to Alex. So, and so that being said, Alex is super helpful. I still don't understand anything, but here's a good question. What if a guy like me is like, you know what, this Bitcoin stuff's interesting. I want to know more about not just investing, but the operations of it. Is there some type of resource out there that you could, what would you recommend? I think the two books, like I think you need to read. So first read the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, like it's Manifesto by the guy Satoshi. Who doesn't exist. Yeah. Oh, he's been named. Yeah. Well, he's been named, but everyone thinks it's a pseudonym. There's all kinds of conspiracy theories about who it is, but I think there's so read the white paper first. Go pick up a book called The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Amos, which is like the very basics, and then buy a book called The Ascent of Money by Neil Ferguson. And there are a variety of other resources, but the key point the Bitcoin Standard is a very easy to read book. It's non-technical. It describes it does a little bit of a history of money, and then it describes the technology, and then it describes some use cases and whatnot. And it's pretty helpful. And then to really understand why Bitcoin is valuable, and that's a key thing. Like, you have to understand the intrinsic value of Bitcoin to be able to invest and weather bear markets, because the volatility of this asset is just too. If you don't really have like a strong conviction in your investment thesis for allocating to this asset class, you will get shaken out, because you're going to have days where it dropped 50%.
Yeah.
And that's like to have some
intestinal fortitude.
Yeah. I mean, but to do that, you have to understand money. And like, that's why I would recommend that book by Neil Ferguson, The Ascent of Money, because it's really like understanding, monetary.
Ascent, ASCENT.
ASCENT of money. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Those are, I think, two good books to read. There's a million of them, and you'll start to find. The other thing I would do is just get on and listen to as many podcasts as humanly possible. I know Anthony Pompliano is an ex-Army guy that's like a very successful crypto investor now, and is like got a pretty popular podcast, pretty smart guy. Preston Pish is actually he runs the Investor Podcast, which some of your listeners may have heard of from other channels. Ex-Army guy, used to fly helicopters, and is now a very, very successful kind of like leading voice in the Bitcoin community. There's just a bunch of really good podcast content out there that you can kind of pick your poison. Like, if you're more into the tech side of it, you can listen to that. If you're more into the mining side of it, there's a whole bunch of podcasts on mining. If you're just into investing and you're just looking for alpha, a bunch of podcasts out there that talk about, just help you talk about or help you think about investment strategies and kind of risks. If you're into derivatives markets, there's something out there for everyone, but the podcast route is literally how I kind of taught myself, or one of the main ways that I taught myself enough to get into the job. That's the other thing I'd say before we close this thing out is if you are going to if you do want to enter into this industry, like, you have to put in the work first to learn the basics. And I say that because there's a massive influx of people that are trying to break into this industry, and you're competing. There's no credentials. Like, they don't care about what degrees you have. They don't care about your former jobs. Really, what they care about at the end of the day is how knowledgeable are you at a baseline, and how long is it going to take to ramp you up to where you are going to be adding value to the company. And so that if you can compress that learning curve prior to the interview, you will give yourself a significant leg up relative to folks who think that they're going to apply, get hired, and then learn everything. Like, you got to do the self-study first.
That's all great advice for the book recommendations, and also breaking into the industry. I got one more question, man. I hope you're okay for a few minutes. Yeah. So it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, at the base level, the white paper or whatnot wanted cryptocurrency to be an actual spending currency. Mm-hmm. Is it now like it's like those, silver dollars that go into currency, but people are like, oh, I'm just going to hold on to them. So nobody's actually spending it. Because my brother knows somebody who, I guess famously bought a pizza with Bitcoin.
Your brother knows the pizza guy? The 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza? It's like the most expensive pizza.
I've never met the guy, but apparently he works for GoRuck, or nice. I guess he was on work for GoRuck or something. But yeah, like, so how did that happen? Where it seemed like it had, like many things, an altruistic nexus, right? Where, hey, we're going to have this money, and you could like send money to your mom down in Guadalajara, and she could buy milk with Bitcoin or whatever. But now it seems like it's this point, like, dude, if you buy a can of milk with Bitcoin, you just spent $1,000.
Yep. So there is a transition right now. It was designed initially to be a peer-to-peer trustless payment system, right, or a currency. Although I think that Satoshi Nakamoto and Hal Finney and the other folks that kind of were conceived of this, like also saw this as a potential, asset class that could be a store of value and be investable as well. But it was primarily built in response to, or in the context of the massive, basically the subprime mortgage crisis and the aftermath there. And yeah, like spending day to day, like Bitcoin as an asset class, does not function very well yet as a transactable currency in the sense that, like, you, just like you said, like you could spend it one day and it could be worth, $60,000 a coin, and you could spend it another day and it could be worth 40,000. Like, it makes it really hard to take salaries. Like a lot of us take partial salaries in Bitcoin, but they're all denominated in US dollars. Like, they're pegged to US dollars. So every month you get pegged like the equivalent. Where that's starting to change, though, is in layer 2 solutions. So the Lightning Network, and it's cumbersome to transact with, like high transaction fees, low transaction throughput. I want to say the last time I looked at the dashboard, it was like 7 transactions per second are able to be executed on the. And now you're thinking like Visa and MasterCard, transact thousands and thousands of transactions or process thousands and thousands of transactions every second around the world, and so. That has always been problematic. I will say the El Salvador, declaring it legal tender and like forcing their economy to start transacting with Bitcoin in conjunction with the Lightning Network, which is what allows for a lot of these transactions to happen much more seamlessly and quickly, is actually proving out. And there are some problems that are that they're finding and we're working through down there, but it is proving that this thing can actually be a national currency and function. And as we move up the adoption curve, and price discovery continues, volatility naturally kind of decreases, right? And I'm not saying that Bitcoin is not going to be volatile going forward. I think we are still pretty early on the adoption curve, which suggests an increasing amount of, or a considerable amount of volatility going forward. But as that kind of smooths out, and as layer 2 solutions become more and more robustly built and developed, it will become something that is not only will it function well as a currency, but it'll be far superior to the current the traditional financial rails that we're operating on right now as a global financial system, because of all the characteristics that make Bitcoin great, right? Like the, almost near instant financial or near instant settlement, irreversibility of transactions, which there's actually some issues there as well. But I think that the road to currency is still a long one, or a road to kind of full blown functioning currency is a long one. But right now it's a hell of an asset class. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you spending all this time with us and going over your career and your
Thank you.
Transition into the civilian world. One of the most interesting careers I can think of. But any parting shots, man?
No, I think, happy to chat with anyone that's interested in kind of learning more about this, because I would not be here right now with a bunch of people.
If it wasn't for your Uber driver and your girlfriend.
Yep. My Uber driver, my girlfriend, and my commander. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, like there's a lot of people that have helped me to kind of navigate this, and I'm very much happy to pay that forward with anyone that's interested.
Awesome, man. And as far as transitioning, what bit of advice do you have to people who are getting out now, or out there in between career 1 and career 2? Or
I think the biggest thing is take the time to really think about what your next career, you have some time, or hopefully you have some time to really think through what that's going to be, and think through it in the context of what is going to be most fulfilling for you. And like, it really just takes some introspection to do that, because the easy button is to go try and, go work at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs. And those are respectable, super prestigious jobs, but for certain people, they aren't what's going to make them happy. And that certainly would not have been where I would have been happy. And it's only because I sat and really took the time to think about it. So really think about like what's going to be fulfilling. And then the other thing I would say is just, assume that you are going to be constantly learning, and, understand that whatever job that you get into on the outside, like the first job that you get, after you've transitioned, you're going to feel like you're completely lost. And you're going to have those days where you're just like, holy shit, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in over my head. I'm not qualified for this. I'm just a grunt, from the military background. I'm doing all this crazy shit, but that's like, not only is that very normal and healthy, but it's also largely not true. Like you will get hired at a place where you deserve to be hired, and you just got to, assume the kind of stance that you're going to be constantly learning and constantly improving, but it will be, at least in my case, it's been really fulfilling so far.
Awesome, man. Well, again, appreciate it. And we'll get your stuff out on the show notes. And you heard it. You can reach out to Alex. Might take a couple of days to get back to you. Might even tell you, hey man, this ain't for you. but sometimes those are some of the best advice is find something different. No, I'm just playing, but appreciate your time, man. And have a great one, dude.
Absolutely. Thanks, brother.
All right, guys. So that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us on the Return to Base podcast. That, of course, was Alex Brammer, who gave us a education on Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, crypto mining. It's still way over my head. So if you have any questions or interest in Bitcoin, I encourage you to reach out to him on LinkedIn, which will be in the show notes. It was really great to hear also about his career. We went into pretty good detail about life in Ranger Regiment and a pretty good insight into what that's like, or at least what it was like. Could be different now. I don't know. Never was in regiment, but I want to also thank Alex for really opening up and being honest with us about his career, about the challenges that he had. And it just goes to show you that looking for help is beneficial, right? If you have some concerns, especially with anxiety or depression, go out there and get some help. Nothing bad can really come out of it as far as I'm concerned. But again, thanks, Alex, for opening up. I think that discussions like this are exactly what this podcast is made for, is not only to talk about how you transition, the bumps you had in the road, the triumphs or tribulations that you face, but also, the human side of the story about feeling overwhelmed, about feeling anxious and not really knowing what's next. So thank you for that insightful conversation, Alex. If you haven't already, please go out there and subscribe to the Return to Base podcast. Go out and visit us on VeteranLife.com, where we have a bunch of blog content about what it's like to be a veteran, tips, things like that on veteran services, or even, good places to live as a veteran. So give us a visit, give us a shout, like us on LinkedIn and all that good stuff. And until next time, have a great day.